Immobile in herself, she gathered forth. This was the day when Satyavan must die.
Good morning. We've come to the end of Canto 1, Book 1, Canto 1, The Symbol Dawn. Earlier in the canto, we had a long step-by-step description of the dawn. The dawn on the day that Satyavan would die, but also, as we discussed, there are different symbolic significances of the dawn, as hinted by the name of the canto, the symbol dawn. And we discussed things like the dawning of spiritual light in the world in the course of its long evolution, the dawning of light in the individual as he unfolds his spiritual potentials, the dawning of light at the beginning of the physical universe. This is hinted at in some of the lines described. So all of these different layers of meaning are there as the dawn slowly brightens over the course of that first section of the poem. And then it turns to Savitri, who is also connected with this dawn of spiritual light in the world, which she is born to bring to humanity. And in that beginning of the second section, in which Savitri is described, Sri Aurobindo hints at her divinity, that she has brought this light into the world in order to hasten humanity's evolution. And he links her also to this idea of the avatar. The avatar also is bringing the light to humanity, and the avatar comes repeatedly over a number of different incarnations. And Sri Aurobindo links Savitri to that idea of the avatar on page 7. He says, a prodigal of her rich divinity, herself and all she had, herself and all she was, she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant, and in their bodies' lives acclimatize, that heaven might native grow on mortal soil. And then he describes the plight of the avatar. Hard is it to persuade earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the eternal's touch. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate repels the light it brings. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice. And then, inflicting on the heights the abysm's law, it sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense it turns against the Savior hands of grace. It meets the sons of God with death and pain. So it continues and speaks about Savitri's particular predicament, that she is holding the foreknowledge of her husband Satyavan's impending death within her heart, and she grieves with that foreknowledge, but is unwilling to impart this knowledge to others around her, to Satyavan, to his parents. So she has to hold that all within her. Okay. Now, Savitri is awakening on this dawn of the day when Satyavan must die. And so we started reading the beginning of her awakening, and also this takes place over many lines of the poem, this very first moments of her waking up. And we came to that last part where she is awakening, And this is the end of the canto, and it links this whole thing to kind of a fundamental theme running through Savitri. So Sri Aurobindo is introducing now the cosmic theme that this story is about. And that comes all in this final awakening of Savitri. So we read it once last time, but let's read it again, and then I want to discuss it more in depth. So we're about 2/3 of the way down on page 9, but now she stirred. And I think this time we start at this end, okay? You'll begin.
But now she stirred, her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit traveled back to the yoke of ignorance and fate, back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway, illumined swiftly where life's darkened rooms, and memory's casements opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors. All came back to her, earth and love and doom. The ancient disputants encircled her, like giant figures wrestling in the night. The godheads from the dim inconscient born awoke to struggle and the pang divine. And in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depth, but not life's goal. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited, unappeased, the daily oblation of her unwept tears. All the fierce question of man's hours relieved. The sacrifice of suffering and desire, earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, began again beneath the eternal hand. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march and looked on this green, smiling, dangerous world, and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose, confronting time and fate. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satyavan must die.
Thank you. So as Savitri awakens, now her mind awakens and her memory of the ordeal is coming back to her. All came back to her, earth and love and doom. And in a sense, I think these are this is the fundamental theme kind of described in this line. The ancient disputants encircled her. So there is earth, its unconsciousness, its suffering, and its doom, its finality, mortality, the approach of death. And then there is love, which saves, which she is bringing to earth, to humanity. So, casements. Yeah, just yeah, I think you would, I don't know exactly, but I would say that they're like cases, boxes, enclosures that open up. So these three Godheads, these ancient disputants, like giant figures wrestling in the night, the Godheads, from the dim inconscient born, awoke to struggle and the pang divine. And then another character, Godhead, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal. And then he's described further, afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited unappeased, unsatisfied, the daily oblation of her unwept tears. So oblation is a religious offering. These unwept tears are Savitri's grief that she holds within and does not tell others about, so she doesn't reveal her suffering, her grief. Okay, so this, I wanted to elaborate on this at some length. And I think that this is a kind of indirect allusion or reference to Prometheus. Prometheus. So Prometheus was this Titan who went against Zeus, God's will, and in order to help humanity, gave fire to humanity, but gave much more. And so Zeus chained him to a cliffside, and there a vulture or an eagle would come daily and peck at his heart, eat his heart, or his liver, I'm sorry, and it would grow back, and it would be repeated day after day. And so he was a symbol of this suffering, also that the divine undertakes for humanity. And so I wanted to elaborate on this myth of Prometheus, because we see, Sri Aurobindo says quite specifically, quite explicitly, that these are ancient disputants, this earth and love and doom, and this pain at the center of that. So this is a kind of an archetype that is there since the beginnings of, civilization, of time. So let's see. So the first, not actually the very beginning, this myth, this Greek myth, goes back in time quite far. There was probably an oral tradition, and then there was a poem about it around 700 BC. And then Aeschylus in 525 BC, or he lived, I guess, from then till 456 BC. So he wrote a poem called Prometheus Bound. Aeschylus. So a Greek dramatist, he wrote this play. It was part of a trilogy, which the second two parts are kind of lost except for fragments of them. I think the second was called Prometheus Unbound, and the third, Prometheus the Fire Bearer, because he brought fire to humanity. And this is why he was punished like this by Zeus. Then there is another important drama, which was written by Percy B. Shelley, published in 1820, called Prometheus Unbound. And there he takes this story and transforms it, elaborates it, gives it some different qualities. Prometheus becomes more of someone who brings kind of love and compassion more. He becomes more of this type of figure, undergoes this suffering for humanity. Now, okay. I have some summaries of these two plays. Do we want to go that far into them?
But I think this is really important because people will not understand this
Mm.
Of course, your window would be first into it.
Right.
So this is part of this psychology, this psyche,
Right.
bring this out.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yes, that's always a question we have in each of these places. How deep do we go into the symbol that is using? But I think this is very significant. I would myself like to hear what you want to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Shall we? So, first, Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound. It opens immediately after the Titan Prometheus has stolen fire from the gods and bestowed it upon humanity. By order of Zeus, he is led by Kratos, power, and Bia, force, while the reluctant Hephaestus rivets him with adamantine chains to a lonely crag in the desolate Scythian wilderness. The image of the solitary divine being bound immovably to the rock establishes one of the most enduring symbols in Western literature. Prometheus has offended Zeus not merely by giving mankind fire, but by bringing civilization itself. Throughout the drama, he enumerates his gifts to humanity: architecture, astronomy, mathematics, writing, medicine, navigation, metallurgy, prophecy, and the domestication of animals. Before his intervention, men looked without seeing and heard without understanding. He awakened reason and culture within them. Thus, he becomes the champion of humanity and the archetypal benefactor who willingly suffers for mankind's advancement.
Excuse me, who wrote that?
Chat GPT. Various visitors come to the bound Titan. The chorus of the Oceanids sympathizes with his suffering, but urges submission. Oceanus counsels prudence. The tragic Io, herself driven across the world by Zeus's persecution, receives from Prometheus a prophecy of her future wanderings and eventual restoration. Through these encounters, Prometheus appears not merely as a sufferer, but as a seer who possesses knowledge surpassing that of Zeus himself. The central dramatic tension lies in Prometheus's refusal to reveal a secret known only to him, a prophecy that Zeus himself will one day be overthrown unless he avoids a particular marriage. Hermes, messenger of Zeus, repeatedly demands this knowledge from Prometheus, threatening still greater punishment. And I think he is the one then that orders this vulture to eat at Prometheus's liver. This Hermes. So he gives first he's chained, but then later greater suffering comes. Okay? And then his suffering is therefore transformed into a moral victory. Outwardly chained, he remains inwardly unconquered. The play ends dramatically. Zeus hurls thunder and earthquake against the rebellious Titan. The rock itself is shattered, and Prometheus disappears into the abyss, still defiant, choosing fidelity to truth over submission to arbitrary power. Symbolically, Prometheus Bound is far more than a myth of punishment. It dramatizes the conflict between tyranny and freedom, power and wisdom, suffering and compassion. Prometheus becomes the image of the divine spirit, willingly bearing agony for the sake of human progress. His immovable endurance, prophetic vision, and self-sacrificing love made him one of the great archetypal figures of later European literature, inspiring writers from Goethe and Byron to Shelley, and providing an image of redemptive suffering that has often been compared with both Christ and, in a different key, the compassionate world bearers of Indian spirituality. Okay, that's the first. Now Shelley, written in 1820, Prometheus Unbound is not a continuation of Aeschylus' Lost Trilogy, but a complete reimagining of the Prometheus myth according to Shelley's own philosophical vision. Shelley admired Aeschylus' heroic Titan, but rejected the ancient resolution in which Prometheus ultimately reconciles himself with Zeus. Instead, he transforms the myth into a drama of universal spiritual liberation. The play begins with Prometheus still chained to the mountain after countless ages of suffering. Unlike Aeschylus' Titan, however, Shelley's Prometheus has undergone an inner transformation. He renounces hatred, withdraws the curse he once uttered against Jupiter. In Shelley's play, it's Jupiter, but this is also Zeus, and attains complete forgiveness. This renunciation is not weakness, but the decisive spiritual act that breaks the cycle of domination. Evil cannot survive once it is no longer answered by resentment. Prometheus is sustained throughout by the invisible presence of Asia, his beloved, who represents ideal love and the eternal feminine principle. While Prometheus endures outward suffering, Asia undertakes a mystical journey through the realms of being. Guided by mysterious spirits, she approaches Demogorgon, the inscrutable power underlying the universe. Demogorgon eventually confronts Jupiter, who is suddenly overthrown, not by violent revolution, but because the age of tyranny has reached its destined end. With Jupiter's fall, Prometheus is released from his chains, yet Shelley deliberately avoids replacing one ruler with another. Instead, a new order of existence gradually unfolds. Love, imagination, freedom, and creative spirit become the governing principles of the regenerated cosmos. Nature herself responds. The earth is renewed. The heavens rejoice. The universe enters a state of harmony. The liberation of Prometheus is therefore simultaneously the liberation of humanity and of creation itself. Just a little bit the end. Shelley's emphasis is not political in any narrow sense, but metaphysical. Evil is understood as a temporary distortion arising from domination, fear, and selfish will. Its conquest comes not through force, but through spiritual evolution, forgiveness, and love. So I think we'll stop with that. Yeah, this Zeus is quite terrible in this original poem, and kind of demands this kind of prayer and submission from human beings, wanting them to worship him, and yet inflicts all of this suffering and pain upon them, and then also tortures Prometheus, who is trying to help humanity, giving civilization and all of these things. And, torments, tortures him in this way. So there is one more. Mm.
These are the seeds for the transformation.
Yeah.
It always expresses itself as kind of tradition, and it's like it's always been present. Even though they like Auroville to put it all together.
Mm.
That's what he was doing. So Savitri obviously is one.
One thing we could also do, Sri Aurobindo refers to Prometheus also later in the poem, and I suspect more than once, but here is, I just found this one now. And this comes in the triple soul forces when Savitri is seeking for her soul. And in her seeking, she encounters in succession 3 Madonnas, right? And then after she encounters each Madonna, she encounters a shadow of them, kind of a dark, transformed form of them. And it is in this shadow being that he speaks to Savitri as she's seeking her soul, and he calls himself Prometheus. So I'll read a little of what he said. This is on page 505 and 506, towards the bottom of 505. So the first Madonna brings kind of light and mercy and love, and then this opposite form comes, answering her pathos of divine complaint. A voice of wrath took up the dire refrain, a growl of thunder or roar of angry beast, the beast that crouching growls within man's depths, voice of a tortured titan, once a god. I am the man of sorrows. I am he who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. To enjoy my agony, God built the world. My passion, he has made his drama's theme. He has sent me naked into his bitter world and beaten me with his rods of grief and pain, that I might cry and grovel at his feet and offer him worship with my blood and tears. I am Prometheus under the vulture's beak, man the discoverer of the undying fire. In the flame he kindled, burning like a moth. I am the seeker who can never find. I am the fighter who can never win. I am the runner who never touched his goal. Hell tortures me with the edges of my thought. Heaven tortures me with the splendor of my dreams. So I'll leave it there. But again, we see this very important archetype in Sri Aurobindo's poem. And it's, I think, very interesting here that before turning to Prometheus, Sri Aurobindo refers to this Christ symbol who is nailed on the wide cross of the universe. So Christ also is a kind of a similar archetype. Instead of being chained on the cliffside, he is nailed to the cross. And he endures this suffering and mocking of the people and their torture, given the crown of thorns and lashed. Here he says, beaten me with rods of grief and pain. Christ was lashed, I guess not with rods, but with reeds. Maybe similar, but cutting his flesh. He describes my passion. He has made his dramas seen. We speak of the passion of Christ as he is kind of led to his crucifixion. So we see how these enduring symbols relating also to the avatar. Sri Aurobindo speaks in several places explicitly about the ordeal of the avatar who must undergo this suffering for humanity. And in that, he often describes Christ's suffering and brings those images to bear on it.
Yes, but at that time they were considering these asuras as gods. And for now, we consider these gods as asuras, but at that time we consider them as gods. Savitri is also highlighted here. She's also like that. Yeah, she is also representing the same thing. He's kind of has been referring to her as bringing the divinity to man. And this figure of pain, this high and godlike pain, is seated in her heart, waiting the daily oblation of her unwept tears. So she is also carrying that pain, that suffering. And she doesn't reveal it to Satchivan. She doesn't even reveal it to, let's say, humanity in a way. She holds that suffering within herself. And we know also, Sri Aurobindo and the mother have also endured this great suffering for humanity. And they don't also speak of it much, but we get a hint of it by the mother in Sri Aurobindo's epitaph on his samadhi, the suffering that he endured. And Sri Aurobindo refers to the suffering that the mother also endured. But they carried that
silently, willingly within them for humanity. So these are some of the principal themes that Sri Aurobindo concludes this first canto with. Yeah, it's brought out quite poignantly in Mother's agenda, the suffering that she was enduring. And even then, I mean, sometimes she would be crying out in pain that others would hear in the courtyard below. And she would kind of swing back between these terrible pangs of pain and suffering, and then she would somehow manage to open her cells, her body, her most material consciousness to the light of the divine, and then it would be transformed into this incredible bliss, divine peace and bliss. And she would be relieved, and that pain would vanish from her being when she could live in that divine light. But the whole purpose of her ordeal was to bring that light into the very cells of her body, into the material foundations of our existence. And so I think it is with all of these avatars that have come before.
Even though there is still a lot of progress to do, I have the impression that between this mentality when they were looking at girls as well as girls, and now there has already been an evolution. I mean, nobody would consider as girls being to behave that way now. And I think that this marks the kind of progress in ethically the sense behind.
Yeah, maybe, but I'm not sure. There is also, within Christianity, there is still a kind of a faction, right, that fears God, and God is this kind of dominating principle that you must fear and you must submit to. And if you don't, you will suffer the wrath of hell. I mean, so there's still quite a few millions of people that are following that line of thought. But hopefully, yeah, many have, especially in India, that was never such a prominent archetype. I think, this idea of God imposing suffering and that kind of thing, punishment.
Yeah, the punishment for wanting the light. This is it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Christians who are like that, they don't want them to punish the same thing.
Yeah. Well, it gets changed, yeah, distorted in a way, I think, the teaching. So, shall we begin with Canto 2? First, we'll read through it, and then we'll go back and comment afterwards. So, would you like to read? Beginning of Canto 2.
Canto 2, the issue. A while withdrawn in secret fields of thought. Her mind moved in the many imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying in it lived imperishably in her, transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, a fateful ghost of self. It bore the future on its phantom breast. Shall I stop there?
Okay, you can continue.
Alone the fleeting events far backward trail, regress the stream of the insistent hours, and on the bank of the mysterious flood, people with well-loved forms now seen no more, and the subtle images of the things that were, her witness spirit stood reviewing time, all that she once had hoped and dreamed and been, flew past her eagle wings through memory's skies, as in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. From the bright country of her childhood days and the blue mountains of her soaring youth and the paradise groups and peacock wings of love, to joy clutch under the silent shadow of doom, in a last turn where heaven rests with hell. 12 passionate months led in a day of faith.
Okay, thank you. Would you read?
An absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. An hour arrives when fail all nature's means, forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need. He at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within. That hour had fallen now on Savitri, a point she had reached where life must be in vain, or, in her unborn element awake, her will must cancel her body's destiny. For only the unborn spirit's timeless power can lift the yoke imposed by birth in time. Only the self that builds this figure of self can raise the fixed interminable line that joins these changing names, these numberless lives, these new oblivious personalities, and keep still lurking in our conscious acts the trail of old forgotten thoughts and deeds, disown the legacy of our buried selves, the burdensome heirship to our vanished forms, accepted blindly by the body and soul. An episode in an unremembered tale, its beginning lost, its motive and plot concealed. A once living story has prepared and made our present fate child of past energies.
Thank you. Try. You read?
The fixity of the cosmic sequences, fastened with hidden, inevitable links. She must disrupt, dislodge by her soul's force, her past a block on the immortal's road, make a raised ground and shape anew her fate, a colloquy of original gods, meeting upon the borders of the unknown. Her soul's debate with embodied nothingness must be wrestled out on a dangerous dim background. Her being must confront its formless cause against the universe way its single self. On the bare peak where self is alone with naught, and life has no sense, and love no place to stand, she must plead her case upon extinction's verge. In the world's death cave, uphold life's helpless claim, and vindictive her right to be and love. Altered must be nature's harsh economy. Acquittance she must win from her past's bond, an old account of suffering exhaust. Strike out from time the soul's long compound debt and the heavy servitudes of karmic gods, the slow revenge of unforgiving law, and the deep need of universal pain, and the hard sacrifice and tragic consequence.
Thank you. P.
Out of the timeless barrier she must break, penetrate with her thinking depths the void's monstrous hush. Look into the lonely eyes of immortal death, and with her nude spirit measure the infinite's night. The great and dolorous moment now was close. A mailed battalion marching to its doom. The last long days went by with heavy tramp, long but too soon to pass, too near the end. Alone, amid the many faces loved, aware among unknowing happy hearts, her armored spirit kept watch upon the hours, listening for a foreseen tremulous step in the closed beauty of the inhuman wilds, a combatant in silent, dreadful lists, the world unknowing, for the world she stood, no helper had she save the strength within. There was no witness of terrestrial eyes, the gods above and nature's soul below were the spectators of that mighty strife. Around her were the austere sky-pointing hills and the green, murmurous, broad, deep-thoughted woods, muttered incessantly their muffled spell. A dense, magnificent, colored, self-wrapped life draped in the leaves, vivid, emerald, monotone, and set with checkered sunbeams and blithe flowers, immured her destiny's secluded scene.
Thank you.
There had she grown to the stature of her spirit. The genius of titanic silences, steeping her soul in its white loneliness, had shown to her herself's bare reality and mated her with her environment. Its solitude greatened her human hours with a background of the eternal and unique. A force of spare direct necessity reduced the heavy framework of man's days and this overburdening mass of outward needs to a first thin strip of simple animal wants. And the mighty wildness of the primitive earth and the brooding multitude of patient trees and the nursing sapphire leisure of the sky, and the solemn way of the slowly passing months had left in her deep room for thought and God. There was her drama's radiant colloque left, a spot for the eternal thread on earth, set in the cloistral yearning of the woods and watched by the aspiration of the peaks, appeared through an aureate opening in time, where stillness, listening, felt the unspoken word, and the hours forgot to pass towards grief and change.
Thank you.
Here, with a suddenness divine advents have, repeating the marvel of the first descent, changing to rapture the dull earthly round, love came to her, hiding the shadow death. Well might he find in her his divine shrine. Since first the earth being's heavenward growth began, through all the long ordeal of the race, never a rarer creature bore his shaft. That burning test of the Godhead in our parts, a lightning from the heights on our abyss, all in her pointed to a nobler kind, near to earth's wideness, intimate with heaven, exalted and swift, her young large visioned spirit, voyaging through worlds of splendor and of calm, overflew the waste of thought to unborn things. Ardent was her self-poised, unstumbling will. Her mind, a sea of wide sincerity, passionate in flow, had not one turbid wave.
Thank you.
As in a mystic and dynamic dance, a priestess of immaculate ecstasies, inspired and ruled from truth's revealing world, moves in some prophet caravan of the gods, a heart of silence in the hands of joy, inhabited with rich creative beats, a body like a parable of dawn, that seemed a niche for veiled divinity, or golden temple door to things beyond. Immortal rhythms swayed in her time born steps. Her look, her smile awoke celestial sense, even in earth's stuff, and their intense delight poured a supernal beauty on men's life. A wide self giving was her native act, a magnanimity as of sea or sky, enveloped with its greatness all that came, and gave a sense as of a greatened world. Her kindly care was a sweet, temperate sun, her high passion a blue heaven's equipoise.
Thank you.
As might a soul fly like a hunted bird, escaping with tired wings from a world of storms, and a quiet reach like a remembered breast. In a haven of safety and splendid soft repose, one could drink life back in streams of honey fire, recover the lost habit of happiness, feel her bright nature's glorious ambience, and preen joy in her warmth and colors rule, a deep of compassion, a hushed sanctuary. Her inward help unbarred a gate in heaven, lost in her was wider than the universe.
Love.
The love in her was wider than the universe. The whole world could take refuge in her single heart. The great unsatisfied Godhead here could dwell. Vacant of the dwarf cell's imprisoned air, her mood could harbor his sublimer breath. spiritual that can make all things divine, for even her gulfs were secrecies of light. At once, at once she was the stillness and the word, a continent of self-diffusing peace, an ocean of untrembling virgin fire. The strength, the silence of the gods was hers. In her he found a vastness like his own. His high, warm, subtle ether he refound, and moved in her as in his natural home. In her he met his own eternity.
Thank you.
Till then, no more mournful line had barred this ray. On the frail breast of this precarious earth, since her orbed sight in its breath-fastened house, opening in sympathy with happier stars, where life is not exposed to sorrowful change. Remembered beauty, death-claimed leads ignore, and wondered at this world of fragile forms, carried on canvas strips of shimmering time. The impunity of unborn might was hers. Although she leaned to bear the human load, her walk kept still the measures of the gods. Earth's breath had failed to stain that brilliant glass. Unsmeared with the dust of our mortal atmosphere, it still reflected heaven's spiritual joy. Almost they saw who lived within her light, her playmate in the sempiternal spheres, descended from its unattainable realms, in her attracting advanced luminous wake, the white fire dragon bird of endless bliss, drifting with burning wings above her days. Heaven's tranquil shield guarded the mission child. A glowing orbit was her early term, years like gold raiment of the gods that pass. Her youth sat throned in calm felicity.
Thank you.
But joy cannot endure until the end. There is a darkness in terrestrial things that will not suffer long. Too glad a note. On her too closed the inescapable, and the armed immortal bore the snare of time.
One dwells with her who meets the burden great, assigner of the ordeal and the path, who chooses in this holocaust of the soul, death, fall, and sorrow, as the spirit glowed, the dubious Godhead with his torch of pain, lit up the chasm of the unfinished world, and called her to fill with her vast self the abyss. Vast self the abyss. August and pitiless in his calm outlook, heightening the eternal dreadful strategy, he measured the difficulty with the might, and dug more deep the gulf that all must cross. Assailing her divinest element, he made her heart keen to the striving human heart, and forced her strength to its appointed road.
Thank you.
For this she had accepted mortal breath. To wrestle with the shadow she had come, and must confront the riddle of man's birth, and life's brief struggle in dumb matter's night. Whether to bear with ignorance and death, or hew the ways of immortality, to win or lose the godlike game for man, was her soul's issue thrown with destiny's dice. But not to submit and suffer was she born. To lead, to deliver was her glorious part. Here was no fabric of terrestrial make, fit for a day's use by busy careless powers. An image fluttering on the screen of fate, half animated for a passing show, or a castaway on the ocean of desire, flung to the eddies in the ruthless sport, and tossed along the gulfs of circumstance, a creature born to bend beneath the yoke, a chattel and a plaything of time's lords, or one more pawn who comes destined to be pushed, one slow move forward on a measureless sport, in the chess play of the earth's soul with doom. Such is the human figure drawn by time. A conscious frame was here, a self-born force.
Thank you.
In this enigma of the dusk of God, the slow and strange, uneasy compromise of limiting nature with a limitless soul, where all must move between an ordered chance and an uncaring blind necessity. To high the fire spiritual dare not blaze, if once it met the intense original flame. An answering torch might shatter all measures made, and earth sink down with the weight of the infinite. A goal is the immense material world. Across each road stands armed a stone-eyed law. At every gate the huge dim sentinel space, a great tribunal of the ignorance, an inquisition of the priests of night, in judgment sit on the adventurer soul, and the dual tables and the karmic norm restrain the titan in us and the god. Pain with its lashed joy, with its silver bribe, guard the wheels circling immobility. A bond is put on the high climbing mind, a seal on the too large wide open heart. Death stays the journeying discoverer life.
Thank you.
Thus,
Thank you both.
Thus is the throne of the inconscience safe, while the tardy coilings of the eons pass, and the animal browses in the sacred fence, and the gold hawk can cross the skies no more. But one stood up and lit the limitless flame, arraigned by the dark powers that hates all bliss in the dire court where life must pay for joy, sentenced by the mechanic justicer to the afflicting penalty of man's hopes. Her head she bowed not to the stark decree, bearing her helpless heart to destiny's stroke. So bows and must the mind-born will in man, obedient to the statutes fixed of old, admitting without appeal to nether gods. In her the superhuman cast its seed, inapt to fold its mighty wings of dream. Her spirit refused to hug the common soil, or finding all life's golden meanings robbed, compound with earth, struck from the starry list, or quench with black despair the God-given light. Accustomed to the eternal and the true, her being conscious of its divine founts, asked not from mortal frailty pain's relief, patched not with failures, bargain, or compromise. A work she had to do, a word to speak, writing the unfinished story of her soul in thoughts and actions graved in nature's book. She accepted not to close the luminous page, cancel her commerce with eternity, or set a signature of weak assent to the brute balance of the world exchange.
Thank you.
A force in her that toiled since earth was made, accomplishing in life the great world plan, pursuing after death immortal aims, repunched to admit frustration's barren role, forfeit the meaning of her birth in time, obey the government of the casual fact, or yield her high destiny up to passing chance. In her own self she found her high recourse. She matched with the iron law her sovereign right. Her single will opposed the cosmic rule. To stay the wheels of doom, this greatness rose. At the unseen's knock upon her hidden gates, her strength made greater by the lightning's touch, awoke from slumber in her heart's recess. It bore the stroke of that which kills and saves.
Thank you.
Across the awful march no eye can see, bearing its dreadful route no will can change, she faced the engines of the universe. A heart stood in the way of the driving wheels. Its giant workings paused in front of a mind. Its stark conventions met the flame of a soul. A magic leverage suddenly is caught that moves the veiled ineffable's timeless will. A prayer, a master act, a king idea can link man's strength to a transcendent force. Then miracle is made the common rule. One mighty deed can change the course of things. A lonely thought becomes omnipotent. All now seems nature's massed machinery, an endless servitude to material rule, and long determination's rigid chain, her firm and changeless habits aping law, her empire of unconscious deft device, and now the claim of man's free human will. He too is a machine amid machines. A piston brain pumps out the shapes of thought. A beating heart cuts out emotions' modes. An insentient energy fabricates a soul.
Thank you.
Or the figure, the world reveals the signs of a tight chance repeating her old steps in circles around matter's binding posts, a random series of inept events to which reason lends elusive sense is here, or the empiric life's instinctive search, or a vast ignorant mind's colossal work. But wisdom comes and vision grows within, then nature's instrument crowns himself her king. He feels his witnessing self and conscious power. His soul steps back and sees the light supreme. A godhead stands behind the brute machine. This truth broke in a triumph of fire. A victory was won for God in man. A deity revealed its hidden face. The great world mother now in her arose. A living choice reversed fate's cold dead turn, affirmed the spirit's tread on circumstance, pressed back the senseless dire revolving wheel, and stopped the mute march of necessity. A flaming warrior from the eternal peaks, empowered to force the door denied and closed, smut from death's visage its dumb absolute, and burst the bounds of consciousness and time.
Thank you. So I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time. So let's stop there for today. And we'll go back over it again next week and examine it more closely.
Immobile in herself, she gathered forth. This was the day when Satyavan must die.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.